So pleased to be joined today by the man who's taking on Alex Kane at MLW Intimidation Games 2024 at Melrose Ballroom on February 29th. It's Bobby Fish. Bobby, thank you for joining me today on Under the Ring Pro Wrestling Conversations. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good, sir. Thank you. Appreciate you having me. And yeah, super excited about what we got going on.
So you're back in MLW now. What are your thoughts on getting in the ring with a pretty darn good technical wrestler in Alex Kane in MLW?
I'm quite, Alex Kane, this has been a long time coming. And when it was first on my radar, I really didn't know much about Alex in the past year. Not only have I met him, but I've learned quite a bit more about him, and it's just made it more. More appetizing. He's doing big things. Former MLW champion. He's got a ton of momentum just from a young guy coming up standpoint, and MLW is doing all good things as well. So for him to be the piece of that puzzle that he is, and for MLW to be doing what they're doing, like it's just it all just converges properly to be a big match.
And it's just you, it seems like, on this run right now with MLW, no groups really. So how does that kind of change things for you when because obviously you're a very prolific tag team wrestler and have been involved with some pretty big groups in your career too.
Yeah, it's a little bit different mindset. You're the show. You're not a piece of the puzzle, which I kind of I think change and difference is good for everyone, and being able to just do something different sort of piques your interest again. It whets your appetite for, like, oh man, I do really still love doing this. So it's I welcome it. I feel like at this point I am kind of doing a lot of stuff solo, and I'm enjoying it.
And you mentioned before some of the things that MLW is doing. They're looking to put some more dates on the schedule in 2024. I know they've got Orlando. I think they've got Chicago on the calendar in addition to their regular stops in New York and in Philly. What do you like about working in MLW, and what's your history with Court Bauer like?
Court Bauer and I go way back, and have always gotten along very, very well. So to be able to work for Court is, it's everything I would want in a situation, and a quote unquote boss, because we do have history. So I know who I'm working for. And that makes it easier to want to go out and produce. Not only, you have pride in yourself as a performer, but to want to go out and produce for that person as well, kind of like a player coach dynamic. I played college athletics and stuff. So there were certain coaches that, like, you wanted to play as well for them as you did for yourself. And I liken that a bit to the way things are with MLW and Court Bauer.
Yeah, when he first got started going with MLW again, he and I talked, and I said to him, like I've always kind of known who you were, but I had no idea really how you got into wrestling. And then I'll kind of learn through that, like, sort of his path through with the Samoans and through WXW. Yeah. And then I think he was with you probably in ROH for a little while there as well. I think Court was over there for a little while.
Yeah, Court. Well, I think that's what makes Court so valuable too, is that he is well traveled and he has come up. Nothing was necessarily handed to him or given to him. And you bring up WXW, and you bring up that family, and that's you look at probably the biggest storyline going right now for the past 2 years has been the bloodline, let's be honest. And that's a literal and a figurative mention in that, it's one of the top things that WWE is pushing right now, but it's so based in reality. So for anybody to be a part of that court being such, like it automatically gives you credibility that other people don't have. And the cloth with which they're coming from. You're not going to get by in that family or with those people in wrestling if you're not if you're the guy that when you have some time to yourself, you just kind of lean back and I'm going to take it easy. Like, no, you got to be a go-getter, and that's who Court Bauer is.
You mentioned, having that respect from, kind of where you come up in wrestling. You broke into the business with someone I know pretty well, Tony Devito in Newburgh, New York. What was your journey like breaking in, and what kind of a mentor is and was Tony?
I actually just spoke to Tony yesterday or maybe the day before. So just a glimpse into who he is. He didn't just train me and then that was it, and take my money and see you later. Like, Tony's been a friend and a mentor and a confidant for years. Somebody I could always call and ask for really anything. I mean, advice, anything, to be honest. And Tony's been such an essential part of my journey. It literally wouldn't exist if it were not for Tony DeVito. So I can't give him enough credit, to be honest.
And I didn't really realize until I was doing some research for this that he was actually in Ring of Honor at the time that he was training you guys. That was when he was in the Carnage crew and that whole thing around 03, 04-ish. That was around that time.
Yeah, and it really kind of shaped my journey in the early years, for sure, because it was through that and then going to the shows and watching Tony perform and seeing what Ring of Honor was, that like I was exposed to independent wrestling. Because prior to that, being a kid from upstate New York, like all I knew was I knew the NWA, which would eventually become WCW, and of course you knew WWF at the time. But I didn't even understand what indies and stuff were, and so to see something that was raw and rugged and kind of underground and coming up itself at the time, watching guys like Samoa Joe and AJ Styles turn into who they would become, Bryan Danielson, Jay Briscoe, to see that and to know my trainer was a part of that as well. I knew that like I was getting the training that I needed from the person I needed to get it from. And then it also, it kind of left me with some unfinished business when it came to Ring of Honor, it became a goal to get back to Ring of Honor in a working capacity at some point. And at that time you couldn't have told me that I wasn't ready, but there's no way I was ready for that.
Yeah, for me, it's cool to see. I live in the Mid Hudson Valley, so it's cool to see. You're obviously from north of me, but just talking to some of those guys and hearing some of the names. I was talking to Hale Collins yesterday, and he's like, "Oh yeah, our class was us and the Outcast Killers and Cheech and Cloudy and Scott Cardinal," and
yeah,
he was mentioning obviously Jeff Leiboldt's kind of involvement early on and that kind of stuff. So
yeah,
it's funny to me to see how it all connects, and
yeah, it really is.
It's cool to obviously still see you doing your thing too. What's it mean to you to look at the top of that card you're on MLW at Melrose? You're a veteran. You got Satoshi Kojima and Minoru Suzuki in a match for the MLW Heavyweight Championship. Lots of other cool opportunities with crossovers and stuff right now, especially with MLW too.
Well, that's what I think is so exciting about being someplace like MLW right now, is that there's just endless possibilities because of the relationships that they continue to foster with other companies and with other talent. You mentioned Minoru Suzuki, you mentioned Kojima. They are absolute Japanese legends of wrestling. I've worked with both. I've been fortunate enough to at times cross paths with them in Japan, and they're total pros, they're total legends, and that they're everything that they seem to be. You know, Minoru Suzuki, his stretch goes far beyond pro wrestling.
Right.
The line in the line that's drawn between shoot and work in Japan is a very, very blurry one. And Minoru Suzuki has, I mean, he's the poster boy for that concept, and the way that it is a little bit different in Japan in that way. And so for these, you know, when I saw the card, if you're a fan of wrestling, if you're a fan of MMA, if you're a fan of Japanese wrestling, for you to not make it either to this show or catch it on Triller, I don't know what you're doing, because this is rare.
You're somebody who that line, I love when that line can be blurry, and I think it can be in the US too. It doesn't have to just be Japan. Japan has a unique history only because it's like sometimes you'd have shoot and work kind of on the same cards, and you'd have to just kind of figure it out too. But I kind of like it when you can have somebody like a Suzuki. I love watching Suzuki, and everything he does is so credible and so real. Quite frankly, it's just you believe in him while you're watching, even if you don't believe anything else on the card. You know, he gets in there and he starts like, what is it like to be? You mentioned having been in the ring with those guys before. What's it like physically to be in the ring with them?
I think it's unpredictable, but in the best way possible. And for me, because martial arts has been a part of my life since I was a kid, I love it. You know, that's how I would choose to do this industry as often as I can. I liken it to other guys that I think prefer. Kyle O'Reilly is one that comes to mind. That I mean, he'd prefer for there to be no daylight. Jay Briscoe's another guy. Brian Danielson, so when that possibility is a variable that's in consideration, personally, I just think it makes it better. And as a fan, I can't imagine how much better that makes it, because it is that unpredictability. It almost can't be given a dollar value.
Yeah, they always say styles create fights, and that's kind of what we have in this situation. You had such a unique path. You spent some time in Noah. You spent some time in New Japan. Obviously, you're running ROH, runs in NXT and AEW. How did the Japanese scene specifically fit you, and how did it sort of change, or did it change the style that you work?
So martial arts being something that I always wanted to blend in, there's a natural kind of dots connected there. But what I've realized many years later was that much of my ability to quote unquote work and like figure it out and not get not get frantic and kind of keep my cool came from working in Pro Wrestling Noah, because at that time I was still learning how to do this business, and every rep was important. But because I was doing it there on such a high level, there wasn't a lot of room for error. But at the same time, you kind of had to figure it out. And there's a language barrier. So I don't know how to, what name to give it exactly, but like there's a physical sort of communication that you begin to develop. And I look back and realize that that's, years, 5 through 10 is when I was developing that. And I didn't realize it at the time. But that's stuff that still serves me to this day. You know, it's stuff that I lean on literally every time that I do pro wrestling.
The MMA and kickboxing and Muay Thai influences in your work are evident for anybody that's going to watch you. What do you still train in some of that stuff now? And how did that kind of come to be? Where I don't know whether that started before wrestling. If your martial arts started before you got into pro wrestling, or if it's kind of sort of just developed as you got more interested in it.
No, martial arts was long before pro wrestling. I started Taekwondo when I was 8. So
Wow.
I kind of never stopped doing some form of it all the way up to this day. I still train Muay Thai pretty regularly. My daughter, my wife and I have an 11-year-old who she started jiu-jitsu and kickboxing. My wife and I were just talking about it last night because she sparred last night, and we just so it's something that I think I'll do the rest of my life in some capacity. Still interested in taking fights as well. I haven't done a kickboxing fight in some time, but we've been close. But I just did a boxing match last November. I think it would have been last November in Dubai. And so, I still try to stay active, and if the price is right, for sure, it'll never not be an interest of mine.
It's got to be pretty fun as a parent to see your child getting interested in it, and like you said, sparring for the first time. What's it like to be in that situation where you're watching that?
Because I know the other side of it and I know the process that's involved. I can watch it, I think, with a little bit more patience, because I realize it's a process, much like pro wrestling. So you have to be in the process and that requires patience. So I try to watch it with that in mind. And then I do my best to back up and let her experience jiu-jitsu and kickboxing for herself. This isn't my experience. I had mine and continue to have mine. And I realize as a parent, there are certain things that can come from the coach that if they come from you, they're not landing. So it's better, to kind of hands off and let the coach do his job. That's why he's there.
Yeah, very good. Backtracking a little bit, because I had one other person I wanted to ask you about with your kind of your development into wrestling, and he's always mentioned alongside your name with training too was Harley Race, and I was kind of wondering what the connection with him was and how that how that was for you.
Harley was how Noah came to be for me. So
Okay.
it was early on. Tony had trained me officially, and I started working independence and stuff like that. And then it was through working with Harley that I was exposed to people from Noah, and they were interested in bringing me over. So Harley was kind of my broker for that. But then, we hit it off, got along really, really well. So I continued to do work with Harley. And when I was in Eldon, I would do some training with Harley. It's Harley Race.
Yeah.
How can you not benefit from all of that experience and just the man that he was? Harley was definitely one of the last of the dying breed, so to speak, in that, Harley was, if he was anything, he was a man.
And it's funny too when you look at wrestling history, because there's always that the previous generation always looks at the next generation as like, that's not wrestling, whatever. And it's funny to me that anybody could have ever looked at Harley Race and seen anything but, credible pro wrestling and just a hard, tough guy that got in there and, didn't gave you no quarter. He was just so, it was such a pleasure to watch him wrestle. And, you had your silly spots like the rocking chair on the rope and some of that kind of stuff too.
Sure.
But, man, did he know how to, kind of blur that line, like you said, between, the tough guy kind of stuff and still needing to be entertaining to an audience too. Like, what do you learn most from Harley when you're kind of sitting under his learning tree?
To take, it's interesting that you say the spot on the ropes, like the rocking chair thing, because he, I think what I gleaned the most from the experience was like taking it serious. Like, it's the wrestling business for a reason. And at the end of the day, that's what it comes down to. And for them at the time, that's literally what it came down to. That's how they were putting food on their tables. And I think some of that gets lost a little bit today. But what I do love is you bring up the rocking chair spot with Harley and how that kind of juxtapositioned who he was. And then I think of a guy like Kyle O'Reilly, who Kyle is another one who, he will tie you up like a pretzel if pushed to that level. But he's such a sweetheart such a sweetheart of a human being. And Kyle found a way. And I know Kyle had some exposure to Harley also.
Mm-hmm.
Kyle will pull, the knobby-kneed Terry Funk cell out of nowhere, and or he'll walk down the end of the apron and take a face plant off the ring, and it kind of comes out of nowhere. And I think that some of that stuff is it's what made Harley great, and it inspires and influences a guy still working today, Kyle O'Reilly, who, and dare I say, like, it adds a layer and an element to him that makes him super unique, and same as it did for Harley.
What was it like teaming with Kyle? Kyle, I will say, is probably my brother's favorite wrestler, and just all the subtleties and stuff that he does, even the subtle humor that he throws in sometimes that you don't catch.
Yeah.
Like, I still have in my phone a freeze frame of him doing my compliments to the chef when you guys are having that dinner, and it's just his face looking ridiculous. That my brother said back and forth to each other sometime. But what's it like working with Kyle? What's it like working with your friends like you did with NXT and so many other places?
Working with those three in NXT was more than we could have ever asked for, to be honest. So when that came together the way that it did, it truly became, we were working hard, and that's what we all wanted to be. We wanted to be the workhorses of that brand, and getting that opportunity, so grateful for that. But to get that opportunity and to do it all together, I don't think any of us could have predicted that. So certainly something we look at now as realizing how fortunate and just trying to be grateful for what it was. So tagging or being in a group with those guys, it was like, for 4 years, I didn't go to work. I got paid like I was going to work, but there was no real work involved. Everything was, was kind of boys' locker room sort of thing. And I think that's why it worked as well as it did for us. I think Hunter recognized what was there, and he just, turned up the volume on it, and then gave us a little bit of direction here and there so that it was somewhat in line with what he saw. But there really was, what you see is what you get for the most part with us and what we were there for NXT. And then as far as just tagging with Kyle, like, yeah, you hit the nail on the head. His quirky sense of humor will blindside you in the best way possible. You don't see it coming, and when it does, sometimes you'll miss it, and you got to go back and watch the tape, and then you go, wait a second, what the hell is he doing? But yeah, he's full of surprises, and I wouldn't change that human being for anything.
Nice. We're going to move on to something we call the 3 count now. It's going to be 3 quick questions and your answers.
Yes,
the first question, what is the sickest submission you could slap on a guy in real life if you had to?
Probably the Twister. I think there's only 2 recorded. I believe there's only 2 in the UFC. I'm not sure of the record in all of MMA, but the Twister basically like splits somebody in half. It a little bit similar to the banana split, which is another one that I don't know. They seem to like draw and quarter a person. So those are pretty vicious.
All right. Second question, aside from Bobby Fish, who has the best mustache in professional wrestling?
Whew. Oh, man. Who would it be? I don't know. I think it's just me.
I did get to ask that question to Magnum TA a few weeks ago too, and he basically said it's just him. It's like it's him and Jake Roberts maybe.
Yeah, I got it. Yeah, you know what? Now that I think of it, if we're going all of wrestling, like Magnum's mustache was the stuff of legend. So yeah, for the sake of time, let's go with Magnum.
And see, like, it's even bigger than it was like in his heyday now too. It's
It's
like 45% of his face. And then last question: if you had to show someone 3 Bobby Fish matches, what would you show them?
I really, I'm very partial to AOP versus the Undisputed Era in Philadelphia. That was, for a kid that grew up on the NWA and watched many Road Warriors versus Tully and Arn matches, to basically be in a similar scenario and have Paul Ellering walking around outside the ring was kind of like a kid just living out his childhood. Some of the VHS tapes that I had worn out on a Saturday afternoon. So that one is really special to me. Any of the War Games matches, they're pretty special to me. I had a open weight title defense by Katsuyori Shibata in New Japan that was special to me. It was them, seeing, just trusting that I could carry that workload. God, there's a bunch of either New Japan or Ring of Honor matches with Kyle and I versus the Young Bucks versus Mark and Jay Briscoe. Yeah, I guess I didn't do a very good job of narrowing it down.
There's no rules.
Yeah. But yeah, there's a few.
All right. February 29th, Thursday night, Bobby Fish versus Alex Kane, MLW Intimidation Games 2024. It's also on Triller Plus. It's at the Melrose Ballroom, Long Island City. Bobby Fish, thank you so much for joining me today on Under the Ring Pro Wrestling Conversations. I really enjoyed this.
Thank you, sir. I really enjoyed it myself. And on February 29th, Alex Kane and I will be changing what my answer would have been to that last question. That evening, I guarantee you that this will not be for the faint of heart, and it will not be something you want to miss. Alex Kane's a high-level athlete. I'm a high-level athlete. We're going to get after it.
All right. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, sir.